Welcome back to Crime Podcastle for episode 38 of our Unsolved Mysteries series. Today, we're diving deep into a case that's both bizarre and unsettling. The Peacock Feather Poisonings of 2017 in India.
Yeah, it's a real head-scratcher. You have these peacock feathers, objects steeped in cultural and religious significance suddenly linked to a series of deaths. It's like something out of a chilling folklore tale.
Yeah.
But this was all too real.
Right, and that juxtaposition is what makes it so disturbing. These feathers, symbols of beauty and prosperity, turned into instruments of harm. So for our listeners, let's set the scene. It all began in April 2017 with a seemingly isolated incident. A young man is found dead, a bundle of peacock feathers near his body. At first, it's just a tragic, unexplained death.
But then a pattern emerges. More deaths, similar symptoms, rapid decline in health, and that eerie presence of peacock feathers near each victim. Rumors start swirling. Is it a curse? Black magic? The fear is palpable.
And I imagine that fear complicates the investigation from the get-go. You have investigators trying to apply logic and scientific methods to a situation steeped in cultural beliefs and anxieties.
Absolutely. The investigators are faced with a unique challenge. Peacock feathers aren't inherently poisonous. So how are they involved? Think about the pressure they're under. They need to sift through superstition and fear to get to the hard evidence.
Okay, so let's talk theories. What were the initial lines of thinking as investigators tried to make sense of these poisonings?
Well, one of the first theories they considered was poisoned gifts. Could these feathers be laced with toxins and given to the victims with malicious intent? This theory played into the personal aspect, suggesting a targeted attack.
That's a chilling thought. Almost like a poisoned apple in a fairy tale, except it's a peacock feather in this case. But then there's the second theory, targeted killings. This suggests a more calculated approach. Maybe the victims were chosen deliberately and the feathers were simply a tool, a macabre calling card. So not just random acts of violence, but planned, premeditated murders. That raises the stakes considerably. Did investigators find any links between the victims? Any common threads that might point to a motive?
Unfortunately, no. No clear connections emerged. And that lack of a discernible pattern added another layer of complexity to the case.
Okay, so we've got poisoned gifts, targeted killings, and I understand there was another theory floating around, one that delves into the psychological impact of fear itself.
Right. The third theory that emerged was mass hysteria. The idea here is that perhaps the victims weren't physically poisoned, but were psychologically manipulated into believing they were cursed. The power of suggestion, amplified by cultural beliefs, could have manifested in physical symptoms.
That's fascinating, but wouldn't medical reports quickly debunk that theory?
You'd think so, right? But here's the catch. Medical reports did confirm the presence of poison in the victims. So, while fear and suggestion might have played a role, there was a very real physical agent causing harm.
Okay, so now we have a confirmed poisoning. This must have shifted the investigation away from the more psychological theories and towards a search for a tangible poison and a perpetrator.
Absolutely. The investigators now had to figure out how a peacock feather, something not inherently toxic, could be used to deliver a lethal dose of poison. It's a forensic puzzle unlike any other.
I can only imagine the challenges. Isolating a poison from something as delicate as a peacock feather, not to mention identifying what type of poison it is.
It's a needle in a haystack situation, to say the least. They were looking for minute traces of a substance they didn't even know existed at first. This involves sophisticated techniques like gas chromatography and mass spectrometry, methods used to separate and identify individual components within a complex sample. Think of it like meticulously dissecting a rainbow to find one specific color.
That's a great analogy. So did they find anything? Were they able to isolate a poison from these feathers?
Yes, they did. After painstaking analysis, traces of a potent pesticide derivative were found on some of the feathers. This was a major breakthrough. It suggested deliberate contamination, someone intentionally weaponizing these feathers.
That's terrifying. And it also seems to rule out the idea of accidental poisoning.
Right. This wasn't a case of someone brushing against a contaminated feather and getting sick. This pointed to a deliberate act, a calculated plan to use these culturally significant objects to cause harm.
So with this discovery, did investigators finally have a lead? Could they trace this pesticide back to a suspect, someone with a motive?
Sadly, no. Despite this forensic breakthrough, the investigation hit a wall. They couldn't definitively link the pesticide to any particular individual. No suspects emerged, no clear motive materialized.
It's like they took one step forward and then two steps back. They had the what poison feathers, but the who and the why remained elusive.
Exactly. And this lack of answers only fueled the fear and speculation. People were left wondering, was this a personal vendetta, a random act of cruelty, or was something even more sinister at play?
So we're left with this unsettling situation. Poisoned peacock feathers, a series of deaths, and a community gripped by fear. I imagine with the investigation stalling, those initial theories, poisoned gifts, targeted killings, mass hysteria, they all start to blend together, creating a sense of paranoia.
That's exactly what happened. The lack of answers created a vacuum, and that vacuum was quickly filled with speculation and new, even more disturbing theories.
Let's dive into those. What new possibilities emerged as the fear surrounding the peacock feather poisonings intensified?
Well, remember, this is India, a land steeped in ancient traditions and beliefs. So as the investigation faltered, people started looking beyond conventional explanations.
Makes sense. When logic fails us, we often turn to the supernatural, the mystical, to try and make sense of the inexplicable.
Precisely. And that's where we see the emergence of the fourth theory, a cult or a ritualistic practice. Imagine those late-night conversations, hushed whispers about secret societies operating in the shadows, using these sacred feathers for some dark purpose.
Okay, I can see how that would take root in people's minds. Peacock feathers already hold spiritual significance, so it's not a huge leap to connect them to some unknown ritual. Did investigators explore this angle? Were there any signs of cult activities, symbols, anything concrete?
They did look into it, but as with the other theories, concrete evidence was lacking. They found no signs of ritualistic gatherings, no unusual markings on the feathers, no connections between the victims that suggested a shared belief system. But the lack of evidence didn't quell all the rumors.
Of course not. In the absence of facts, fear and imagination run wild. So what was the fifth theory? You mentioned it earlier, the idea of an unknown agenda.
Right. This theory posits that someone, or some group, is orchestrating these poisonings for reasons that remain completely hidden. It's the most chilling possibility because it suggests a level of calculation and control that's almost incomprehensible.
So not a crime of passion, not revenge, not even a twisted ritual, but something far more calculated, something with a larger unknown purpose.
Exactly. The peacock feathers in this scenario become tools of misdirection. They create confusion, they distract from the true motive, and they amplify the fear. It's about sowing chaos and maintaining control through obscurity.
It's like a shadowy puppet master pulling strings, using these feathers to manipulate events from a distance. Did investigators ever explore the possibility of a larger conspiracy?
They certainly considered all angles, but again, concrete evidence was elusive. Investigating a conspiracy theory is incredibly difficult, especially when there's no clear target, no specific group to focus on.
It's like trying to catch smoke. You can see it, you can feel its effects, but you can't quite grasp it. So we have these 5 theories, each one more unsettling than the last, swirling around these poisonings.
And what's truly frustrating is that none of them are definitively ruled out. The investigation, despite the forensic breakthrough of identifying the pesticide, reaches a standstill. No suspects, no arrests, no motive. Just a string of unanswered questions and a community left to grapple with the fear and uncertainty.
What a nightmare for the families of the victims. Not only have they lost loved ones in such a horrific way, but they're left with this void of understanding. No closure, no justice, just this lingering sense of unease.
Absolutely. And it's not just the families. This case had a ripple effect throughout the community, even the country. Peacock feathers, once symbols of beauty and good fortune, became objects of suspicion. People were afraid to keep them in their homes, worried about attracting bad luck or becoming the next victim.
It's a stark reminder of how quickly fear can transform our perceptions. How easily something beautiful and meaningful can become a source of anxiety and dread.
Right. And that fear, that shift in perception, is part of the lasting legacy of the peacock feather poisonings. It serves as a cautionary tale, a reminder that even the most familial objects can hold hidden dangers, and that sometimes the scariest mysteries are those that remain unsolved.
We've been exploring the unsettling case of the peacock feather poisonings, a mystery that gripped India in 2017. We've talked about the initial shock, the emergence of those 5 chilling theories, and the dead ends investigators hit at every turn. It's a story that really gets under your skin, leaving you with more questions than answers.
It really does, and it highlights how a seemingly isolated incident can have far-reaching consequences, touching on cultural beliefs, social anxieties, and even our perception of everyday objects.
As we wrap up our deep dive, I'm curious about the lasting impact of this case. Did it lead to any changes in investigative procedures or public awareness campaigns?
Well, while there weren't any major policy changes directly attributed to the peacock feather poisonings, it did spark important conversations. On a practical level, it underscored the challenges of investigating cases where cultural sensitivities and forensic science intersect. You have to navigate those complexities carefully respecting beliefs while adhering to scientific rigor.
Right, you can't dismiss cultural beliefs as mere superstition,
Yeah.
but you also can't let them derail a scientific investigation. It's a delicate balance.
Exactly. And I think this case also served as a wake-up call for public health officials. It forced them to consider the potential for everyday objects to be weaponized, even those we typically associate with beauty and good fortune.
It's a chilling thought. It reminds us that danger can lurk in unexpected places. But beyond the practical implications, I'm wondering about the psychological impact. How does a community, a nation, even recover from something so inexplicable and unsettling?
That's a crucial question, and I don't think there's a simple answer. In some ways, the fear never truly goes away. Those peacock feathers, once cherished, now carry a shadow of doubt, a reminder of the darkness that can touch even the most sacred objects.
It's like a stain that can't be fully erased. The poisonings may have stopped, but the unease lingers.
It does, and perhaps that's the most unsettling aspect of this whole case. The knowledge that some mysteries, despite our best efforts, may never be solved. We crave explanations, we want to understand the why behind the events that shape our world, but sometimes those answers remain elusive.
It's a humbling thought. It forces us to confront the limits of our understanding, to accept that there are things in this world that may forever remain beyond our grasp.
And that can be a difficult thing to reconcile, but it also reminds us of the importance of critical thinking, of not jumping to conclusions, and of acknowledging the gray areas, the spaces where certainty fades and doubt takes hold.
So as we close the chapter on the peacock feather poisonings, what's the takeaway for our listeners? What should they be pondering as they go about their day, perhaps looking at a peacock feather with a newfound sense of awareness?
I think the key takeaway is this: the world is full of mysteries, both beautiful and unsettling. Some we can solve, others we can only ponder. But it's that very act of pondering, of questioning, of seeking understanding that defines our humanity.
Beautifully said. And that's what we strive to do here at CrimePod Castle, to explore the dark corners, to grapple with the unknown, and to encourage our listeners to think critically and engage with the world around them. And if you enjoyed tonight's deep dive, be sure to follow and subscribe to CrimePod Castle for more.
Exactly, because even in the face of unsettling mysteries, there's a certain allure, a fascination that draws us in. It's a reminder that life is full of surprises, and that sometimes the most intriguing stories are the ones that remain unfinished.
Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones that leave us with more questions than answers.